Where were you born?
I was born in Oberlin, Ohio, right after a blizzard. They had to take my mother out to the main road on a sleigh to get her to the hospital.
On a sleigh?
On a sleigh.
Oh my goodness.
And I know that makes me sound really old, but nothing was moving, and it was right at the end of World War II.
What year was that?
Huh?
What year was
In
that?
1944.
1944.
So my dad was thrilled because he needed new tires, and when I was born he got a ration book with my name on it so he could buy tires for the car.
Don't put this in there, but I don't even know what a ration book is. What
No,
is that?
but the older people will
Okay.
know.
I'm like, what is a ration book?
Yeah, I still got one around here someplace. My grandpa.
And Oberlin, Ohio. So that is that south of us?
It's in Lorain County, up
Oh,
by
it's
the
Lorain,
lake.
okay. And what was your childhood like? Were you in a rural community like this? Like, were you on a farm? What was
We
that like?
lived on a farm, and I was an only child. We had horses, two big old draft horses that were more like pets to my grandfather by the time I was around, but he had always farmed with horses in his younger days, so he just kept them because he couldn't stand to put them down. My dad was a dairy farmer, and he also had general crops. We were fairly self-sufficient in that we had a garden, and we ate beef most of the time because we had cows. And when I was about...
How did you get to Fredericktown from Lorain?
Well, I graduated from college and I needed a teaching job, and I interviewed several places. And I had offers from 3 places, but Fredericktown was the only one that would guarantee me a grade level. The rest just said, you have a job and we'll decide what you'll do when you get here. And I didn't feel comfortable with that. And even though it was less money, Fredericktown was an awful lot like the community I grew up in. And I just felt more comfortable here than I did in a city, because the other 2 were larger cities. And I'm not a city girl. I just don't think I could do it. Although, never say never, but...
So, you grew up in Lorain. You came to Fredericktown for a job.
Mm-hmm.
Where does this guy come into your life?
Well, I've been teaching about 6 or 7 years, and I don't know, I think maybe people were starting to feel sorry for him. But I had a student in my class that year. His name was Randy, and his mother knew Terry's mother, and so they set us up on a blind date. And 13 weeks later, we were married. Our kids don't know that, but I guess they will now.
So, were you? So you were here in Fredericktown?
Yeah, I came back to work here in the Fredericktown area.
Okay.
And after I graduated from engineering school out in Indiana, and so we got together and things happened.
It stuck. It'd be 44. It'd be 45 years in December. We've been married.
Wow. 45 years. But were you raised here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you just went to Indiana for school?
Yeah.
Okay. We haven't talked about this. Have you always been going to FUMC, or did you start going to FUMC when you had kids? Like that. How did you integrate church with your life and then with your children?
Well, we started going to FUMC when Pastor Hinkle was here shortly after we were married.
Yeah.
He called on us and invited us to come. I grew up in a UCC congregation, and Terry grew up going out to Salem, out at the far western edge of the county.
Mhm.
And at that time, we were bad. We weren't going anywhere, as often happens with people when they're in their 20s. They kind of
Newlyweds.
drift away, and
Sorry, I couldn't find anything.
oh
like
dear, I must have bumped something. Well, I'll just let it go to sleep.
Okay.
But one thing, Pastor Hinkle was a student pastor at Salem. That's how he knew about us, or knew about me. And so that's where I knew him from. When I was in high school, he was a pastor at, or a student pastor at Salem.
So is that where you were married in Salem?
No.
No,
Yeah.
we were married in Kipton, which is the church that I attended when I was growing up.
Okay. So how did you come to FUMC then?
Well, it was a result of his invitation. It was shortly after we were married. It was before we had kids.
Right, and Moody's were gone there.
Right, and Moody's were.
I'd known Bill and Karen for a long time before that. And, well, Bill was in high school at the same time I was. So, yes.
Are they your best friends?
Pretty close
Pretty close.
as friends go. I mean, we have a lot of people now that we consider really good friends, but I would say we've known them probably about the longest. Karen is always there with an idea or help, and she actually helped us find an apartment.
Yeah.
Oh, when you were first married?
Well,
Yeah.
not when we were first married, but shortly after we were married, we needed to move just because we were in a one-bedroom apartment, and well, we were there for probably about 3 years before we moved.
Right, after I
And-
started the business.
But then I was pregnant and we didn't have any place to put it. You know, in a one-bedroom apartment, it was really, really tight. And she and Bill were living in a double, just not too far from where we are. And she said, people on the other side are moving out. Call Pat McQuigg.
Yeah.
So we did. And so we moved in and lived in the other half of the house that they were living in at the time before they moved to the farm.
Okay. And were they going to FUMC at that time
Yeah,
as well? And
they were.
probably invited you to come.
Right.
Okay. And
Sure
you've
they-
been there ever since?
Been there ever since.
We wanted to do this testimony for FUMC, and I know that you have these questions here, and the first one is, what did you want to share today? And I'm assuming, what did you want to share with FUMC today?
Okay. Well, along probably April or so, Richard asked me to speak and give some testimony about our journey through this ALS experience. And you probably heard them say that life is what happens when you're making other plans. And we had other plans. We had the house paid for. We got all our kids through school and launched. That means they're not living in our basement. They're all homeowners. Terry wasn't planning to retire, but he has a lot of accumulated vacation, and we were going to try to travel a little bit and do some things that we put off for years, because we had a lot of years we didn't go anywhere when he was starting the business. And we thought we would do that while we still had our wits and our health. And then I got an ALS diagnosis and everything changed. So,
Can you tell me what ALS is?
well, I can't ever remember what ALS stands for because it's a tongue twister. But it's also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And it's a progressive disease that affects the muscles in your body and the nerves that control those muscles. and the nerves degenerate to the point where you can no longer walk, and eventually it affects all the voluntary functions in your body, including respiration and the ability to swallow and eat normally. It's about the only thing that is not affected usually is your mind and the voluntary muscles that you use for your natural body processes. Like, I mean the involuntary muscles. I said that wrong. Your heart continues to beat and those kind of things, but voluntary stuff is just ceases to work, except for your eyes. For some reason your eyes seem to continue to work.
What signs did you have that led to your diagnosis?
Well, I had to write this down because there were so many I was afraid I would leave something out, but unrecognized at first. But my walking started to go a little, well, no, actually I started with numbness in my feet and my little fingers, just the little ones. And I had sciatic pain in my right leg, and my right foot dragged and caused me to fall. And I fell quite a few times. My first major fall was in the shower. And I wasn't hurt, but the shower door didn't do so well. We had to replace the shower door because I bent the frame up so badly. It couldn't be fixed. And my balance was really bad. I noticed that I was dropping things. And I fell enough that I broke a bone in one foot. And I was having leg cramps at night. Severe leg cramps. And sometimes my right leg ached at night, making it hard to sleep. So I had a nerve function test, and this showed that the signals from the brain to my right leg were interrupted. And an MRI showed that I had a herniated disc and spinal stenosis, which is arthritis. And that put pressure on the sciatic nerve. And so Dr. Elder referred me to a back surgeon. And that was the first sign that something was seriously wrong.
It took what, a year and a half? Year to a year and a half, right?
Probably a year and a half, maybe even longer than that before I got the real diagnosis.
I remember it was at least a whole school year.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, at least whole school
I
year.
remember that.
Now, the surgeon recognized that there was another problem and had us see
Right.
a neurologist at that time, and that's where
Yeah.
things started to
Right.
play.
So
At what point did you become aware of God's presence during this journey?
well, he just referred to the surgeon, but before that, I became aware that God was taking charge when Dr. Elder's office called me one morning and said that Dr. Chen, who was the back surgeon, had an opening that next day. And he usually took 4 to 6 weeks to get an appointment. So I took it, and I went to that appointment, and he recommended what they call a laminectomy, which is what they call this Band-Aid surgery that you see advertised on TV, where they just make a very small incision in your back and clear away the part of the bone that's putting the pressure on the disc and on the nerve. And, but he also the same day said your foot's dragging, and that's not consistent. And so he did refer me to a neurologist. And, but I went ahead and had the surgery, and that took care of the leg and hip pain and the knee hurting at night when I was trying to sleep. But I still had trouble walking. And actually, when I should have been getting better, I continued to get worse. And I had to go back to using the walker. And my balance kept getting worse. And I kept on falling down. And so I continued to buy appointments with the neurologist, but nothing conclusive showed up right away. But we had a vacation scheduled in November, so it was a cruise, and I was determined I was going to go. So we packed up my walker and all the other stuff we need, and I went. And one evening we went back to the cabin after going to the evening show and dinner, and it wasn't that late, so we decided we'd watch a movie. And we watched the movie called The Theory of Everything. And it's a movie about Steve Hawking. Now, you people that are science nerds like we are probably know who Steve Hawking is, but he has ALS, and he's written several books since he became confined to a wheelchair. And but the movie was interesting in that it showed how the disease progressed in him, and I looked at those symptoms and I thought, oh, this has an awful familiar look. And wasn't too long after that, we went back to my next neurology appointment in February, and he gave me another nerve function test, and afterward he said, I hate to tell you, but he says, I hope I'm wrong, but I think you have ALS. But I think God probably guided me to that movie to prepare me for that diagnosis, because I wasn't really surprised. I just thought that was probably what it was, and I can't say I was happy about it, but I was prepped, which shows God can use anybody at any time, and Steve Hawking probably isn't aware of the fact that God used him because he's an atheist. So, so God can use anybody to deliver a message to you. And you might wonder why it took 18 months or more to come to a diagnosis, but there's no test for ALS. The way you find out is by eliminating everything else. And that's what they did. But they sent me from there over to the USU ALS clinic, and they concurred with Dr. Nash's opinion. And so I've been going to OSU ever since.
How often do you go to OSU?
We have an appointment there every 3 months.
Okay.
But there are always other things in between.
Yeah.
I've been to physical therapy and occupational therapy and brace fittings and, oh gosh, what else?
Oh, fittings for the chair. I mean,
Oh yeah.
Refittings on the chair.
Refittings on the chair.
You stay busy.
Yeah. It seems to come out about at least one appointment every 2 weeks.
In what way has your life changed?
Well, the most obvious one is this wheelchair. And some people feel like a wheelchair is confining. They say they're confined to a wheelchair, but in my case, it's freeing, because I can get from point A to point B, as long as there's no steps involved. You know, stairs are my major barrier, I would say, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah.
And our house is full of steps. I have to depend on other people for my most basic needs, and you can interpret that any way you want to. Travel's difficult because a lot of places don't have family bathrooms. So I have to have Terry to be with me for things like that. And medical appliances or hardware takes up a lot of space. When you go someplace, our van is jam-packed with stuff.
Yep, lifts.
Lifts and toilet chairs and my BiPAP machine, and you know, it's like traveling with a baby times 5. Anybody that has small children, you know how much it is to go visit grandma overnight. Well, when you take grandma to visit, in my case, it's a lot of stuff. And breathing and eating have become more difficult. Mainly getting the food to my mouth. So far I haven't had any trouble with swallowing, but they tell me that will happen. So I will probably be getting a feeding tube put in, and maybe by the time this airs I will have this procedure done, because I currently am scheduled for the 16th. It depends on what the anesthesiologist says when I go to see him next week, on whether I'm able to have the surgery or not, because my respiration is poor.
So, did you want to talk about what's next or what's anticipated?
Well, there are some positives. I'd like to make sure
Okay.
I get those talked about.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, of course, you're going to think this is silly, but I'm glad that my grandson is a Star Wars fan, because eventually I'm probably going to sound like Darth Vader and look like Jabba the Hutt. And when I get my BiPAP machine on, I look like a pilot that's getting ready to attack the Death Star. I don't have to worry about wearing out shoes anymore, because my feet never touch the ground. I can now make a good justification for manicures and pedicures, because I can't file my own nails or cut them. I can read all I want, because I have so much time on my hands now. I never did like to diet and exercise, and they told me specifically not to do those two things. They said if I lose weight at this point, I will be losing muscle, and that's not a good thing for me to do. And exercise will actually burn up the muscle, and now that I've lost that function, the muscle will not regenerate itself. So I can do stretching, but nothing to increase strength, because it won't happen. I never liked to cook and clean. Don't have to do that anymore. That's a good thing. There is a new medicine on the horizon, which I've been approved for. It's supposed to be released sometime in August. We're waiting to see if the insurance company will pay for it. It costs $11,000 a month. And
What will that do for you?
it's supposed to slow the progression and will extend life to some degree, but it's not a lot. And of course, it's hard to say how long that will be. I mean, they have evidence now that in a double-blind study, it seems to help people live longer, but how much longer varies from person to person. Medical technology is a wonderful thing. I'm getting a feeding tube, which I kind of think of as the ultimate in body piercing. So you people with pierced nails got nothing on me. Also, the BiPAP machine helps me breathe at night. Because when I lay down on my back, I really have trouble getting a breath. My breath is very short now. I can no longer sing, so I don't think there's any chance of my having to worry about rehearsing for Carnegie Hall or anything like that. My two biggest things that I'm grateful for is, well, actually three. One is the friends that I've got here in the church. Karen Moody has been wonderful as far as arranging meals for us. Terry is not much of a cook, although he's getting a lot better. And so when he gets home from work, the last thing he needs to think about is preparing.
Now, when I saw you on Tuesdays for quilt group, and I saw you before you were diagnosed, and I think it was that one of the days, a Tuesday, that you came, and I think that morning you had gotten the diagnosis. Do you remember if it was a Tuesday? And because it might have been it was either Monday or Tuesday.
I can tell you this: it was probably the 13th. Everything.
Everything is the 13th.
Everything is the 13th?
13th,
okay.
yes.
But I remember all of us were sitting at the table and you came in and said, well, I got the diagnosis. It is ALS. And we all sat there like, because you had a big smile on your face. How do you do that?
How do you do that?
How do you do that? I think you giggled and you laughed and smiled and said, well, we'll just deal with it. We'll keep moving on.
Well, I mean, you have a choice. You really do have a choice in how you live your life, and that's what I intend to do as long as I can, is to live my life, and it comes out of attitude. And I got some here. I'm going to have Terry read, because I've had this on my refrigerator for years, and part of it, this didn't come from my mother, but it's kind of the way she lived, and it's so good to remember that you have to think about the good stuff and not the bad stuff. So you read that.
Okay, this is called Attitude by Charles Swindoll. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstance, than failures, than successes, than what other people think or say or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for the day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes.
All right, the membership in the church has been wonderful to me. I have made new friends that I didn't know as well before. I knew by sight, but now I know their heart. I've had Karen Moody to thank for arranging all the meals. I've had so many people just do nice things for me that are totally unexpected and totally unsolicited. That's been wonderful. Barb Humphrey comes without fail once a week helps me get my laundry done. And by helps, I mean she does it. And we talk in between loads. It's just been, the outpouring has just been beyond what I ever expected. Terry's been my backbone, and almost literally some days when I can't sit up straight, I say, push me up, Terry, and he'll just give me a shove and straighten me up. But I couldn't have done this without him. And he's one person who definitely took the vows for better, for worse, and sickness and health to heart, because I don't think anybody would sign up for this willingly. But he has. But I think the most important thing is my faith. I'm not afraid to die. Well, I'm not especially thrilled about what happens between now and that point. I know things are going to get more difficult and harder for him to watch and me to put up with. Being trapped inside your body doesn't sound like a very happy way to spend your day. But I know that God loves me, and He is walking beside me and leading the way, and it's going to be better. It'll have to get worse before it gets better, but it's going to be better, and I'm grateful for that. And you asked me earlier what were my favorite verses.
Mm-hmm.
And one that I never thought about too much until just recently is, if I can bring my iPad up here, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse, lost the page, is verse 16 through 18. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Now, I'm not sure that ALS was God's will for me, but how I react to it is my way of demonstrating how to make the best of a bad situation. And also goes back to the attitude piece that Terry read earlier. Mm-hmm. It's how you react to things. And the other favorite verse is the 23rd Psalm. And I feel right now I am walking through the valley of the shadow of death, because we all live in that shadow. Nobody's going to get out of this alive. We're all terminal. The difference is I know what my journey is probably going to be like. And as long as God and you all and Terry are with me, I can do it, even though it's difficult. Yeah.
Did you want to add anything?
No.
Okay.
I'm not looking forward to it, but it is what it is, so.
Well, the one thing is that we have such a loving church, and people have got, that's just the amount of love that's poured out to Ellen and me has just been phenomenal. You just can't put it in words, and people coming new to the church, get involved, get to know people, because you'll find this church is just full of love from all directions, and that has just been phenomenal for us. I mean, what you put in, you get back in multiple fold. So, but we'd say a big thank you to everybody in the church.
Good?
Yeah.
I had this stuck in my cookbook for years, and I think this is a good way to end. I want Terry to read it to you, because the print is small.
If I Had My Life to Live Over by Irma Bombeck.
Now, I don't know how many people remember Irma Bombeck, but she wrote a humor column. This is not funny.
I would have gone back to bed when I was sick instead of pretending the earth would go into a holding pattern if I wouldn't there be, or wouldn't for the day, if I weren't for the day.
You want to read that again?
Yeah.
You can edit that.
Okay, I would have gone back to bed when I was sick instead of pretending the earth would go into a holding pattern if I weren't there for a day. Okay. I would have burned the pink candles structured like a rose before it melted in storage. I would have talked less and listened more. I would have invited friends over to dinner even if the carpet was stained or the sofa faded. I would have eaten the popcorn in the good living room and worried much less about the dirt when someone wanted to light a fire in the fireplace. I would have taken the time to listen to my grandfather's ramble about his youth. I would never have insisted that car windows be rolled up on a summer day because my hair had just been teased and sprayed. I would have sat on the lawn with my children and not worried about grass stain. I would have cried and laughed less while watching TV, and more while watching Life. I would have never brought anything just because it was practical, wouldn't show soil, or was guaranteed to last a lifetime. Instead of wishing away 9 months of pregnancy, I'd have cherished every moment and realized that the wonderment growing inside me was the only chance in life to assist God in a miracle. When my kids kissed me imperiously, I would never have said later, "Now go get washed up for dinner." There would have been more "I love yous," more "I'm sorries," but honestly, given another shot at life, I would have seized every minute, looked at it, and really see it, live it, and never give it back. Stop sweating the small stuff. Don't worry about who doesn't like you, who has more, or who is doing what. Instead, let's cherish relationships we have with those who do love us. Let's think about what God has blessed us with and what we are doing each day to promote ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, as well as spiritually. Life is too short to let it pass you by. You only have one shot at this, and when it's gone, I hope you have a blessed day.
I've read that before.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, I have one more question. Unless you're done,
Okay.
or are you all done?
I'm done.
You're done. Okay, it's for Terry.
Oh,
Now she said some really nice things about you. What do you have to say to our congregation about Ellen? What do you want everybody to know that maybe we don't know?
well, she's
about
one of the
her?
most wonderful ladies in the world. I mean,
Well, of course.
she's always upbeat. No matter what kind of problems we run into, we get through them. You know, like right now, every day is a new day. We don't know what's going to come up. We deal with it and we move on. And it's just a great attitude to live with. I mean, it's, and I guess it's been that way all through our whole life. Going back when we first met, things just clicked. I mean, and when I was thinking about starting the business, she got right behind me, and we started the business. And when we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment for how many years?
Well,
Wow.
3 boys, and that just was what we had to do while we were getting started. And but she's a great lady. She's just the love of my life. So.